So I watched Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1 last night. If you've been looking for a good action movie these last few months, and are a longtime fan of the series like me, this is definitely a must-watch. Seasons change, but Tom Cruise is still the same lovable madman with a death wish who's always worth going to see a movie for. His commitment to do the most crazy and awe-inspiring stunts of any Hollywood movie himself has been the core appeal of the Mission Impossible movies since the very beginning, while also providing fun stories that work fine as standalone adventures, but provide many meaningful insights into Ethan Hunt's story when put together. Dead Reckoning takes place sometime after Mission Impossible Fallout, where Ethan and his team are now racing against every major government in the world in order to obtain two keys to a sentient AI known as the Entity. Whoever controls it will have full dominance over every digital network or integrated piece of technology in the entire world. Essentially, the ultimate AI apocalypse nightmare teased by entities like Skynet or Shodan. Ethan being forced to go rogue is hardly the newest plotline in this series, but I would say it's justified here more than ever before because the stakes have never been higher. At the same time, he's also pitted against Gabriel, a calculating and near-omnipotent agent for the Entity who played a key role in a tragedy from Ethan's past that shaped him into the agent he is today. Between him, a pair of bounty hunters sent by the US government to neutralize Ethan, and a wayward thief named Grace who's also trying to take the key for herself, he's definitely got his work cut out for him in this movie. It's a lot to process, especially with a near 3-hour runtime, but Dead Reckoning does a better job than most recent blockbusters of making sure most of its scenes push the story forward and maintain a steady balance of action and necessary exposition. It also manages to be a cohesive story with a solid beginning, middle, and end. So if you're worried this is going to be like many other movies that were split into two parts, where the first half is nothing but setup or dragged out filler to pad out the runtime, only to be cut short abruptly to set up part 2 for next year, rest assured that isn't the case. What I love most about the action in this movie is that every set piece from shootouts, chase scenes, and good old standoffs all flow seamlessly into each other, and just when one of them starts to feel a little dragged out, something happens in the narrative that turns everything on its head and throws everyone, even the gang we've come to know and love over the years, into a desperate panic as their plans go to hell. Anybody who's seen the airport sequence or the chase scene in Rome knows exactly what I'm talking about. And they also serve to develop Ethan and Grace's bond across the movie very well. I was pleasantly surprised at how well the movie turned her from a self-motivated thief willing to ditch Ethan every chance she got into a reliant yet vulnerable companion. Sure, she's clever and resourceful, but none of that is played off as obnoxious girl boss tropes that make her infallible or better than Ethan. And it's genuinely sweet seeing the partnership develop between every brush with death they survive together. I'm sure some people may find her annoying given how often she mistrusts Ethan, but it makes sense given her backstory and the fact her life is always thrown in danger every time they meet. Overall, she's a good addition to the team and provides a much appreciated human perspective towards all of the insanity Ethan manages to survive in this movie. Luther, Benji, and Ilsa are all just as great as when they were first introduced, providing heartfelt drama and fun banter when needed. Even though they're still an unbreakable team, seeing them grapple with the cold logic and endless probable outcomes of the Entity really sold just how terrifying both it and its minion Gabriel really were. The Entity itself is also a fascinating character, standing as this ever-present and omniscient force that can predict every move our heroes make, and set up masterful countermeasures to those moves in order to guarantee the best outcome for itself. Given how controversial artificial intelligence has become these days, it was a brilliant move on the writer's part to make this Ethan's ultimate adversary in his final outing, and show just how dangerous a program like this would be in a world as reliant on technology as ours. Even though it isn't necessary to watch the other movies to understand the plot of Dead Reckoning, certain aspects will definitely be appreciated more by longtime fans than the casual viewer, like the return of Kittredge and the darker Dutch angle style of the first movie. Funnily enough, the setup and tone of Dead Reckoning actually reminded me of Season 7 of Burn Notice. Both feature the main character going on the most high-stakes mission of their entire lives, are pitted against a charismatic villain who preys on their insecurities through a tragic event from their pasts, and take more daring risks by themselves in order to protect their friends from a threat they feel powerless against. That's what really sold me on Dead Reckoning being the final chapter of this story. And while the introspection doesn't go quite as deep as Burn Notice, it's still nice to see that for all of his superhuman feats, Ethan's a flawed human being whose recklessness can cost him dearly, even after everything he's been through. Regardless, he still has the same unbreakable resolve that makes him so compelling, willing to sacrifice every part of himself, even his deepest desires, to ensure nobody has to die, even with all of the impossible odds stacked against him. Of course, if you're just here for the action, Dead Reckoning delivers on that in spades, with all of it being bolstered by the fact that Tom Cruise is putting his own life in danger in order to entertain us. I wouldn't say it reaches the heights of scaling the Burj Khalifa in Ghost Protocol or the helicopter chase in Fallout, but it's still an amazing ride from the airport scene onwards, and most certainly puts every other mainstream blockbuster released this year to shame. I mean, where else are you going to see a car chase where the main character is cuffed to somebody else the entire time, as they're being chased by a heavily armed military carrier and the entire Italian police force? Or a full-blown fistfight on top of an actual moving train the crew constructed, just so they could film it crashing into the ravine below for real. This is precisely why people used to love watching action movies before the advent of CGI, because back then, they knew these were real people doing these things, instead of elaborate video game cutscenes. There's plenty of enjoyment to be had with Dead Reckoning, even if you haven't seen the other Mission Impossible movies. That being said, this movie isn't perfect. The first 20 minutes are front-loaded with exposition, in stark contrast to other movies in this series that usually began with a fun action set piece or establishing the villain right away. But it's a necessary evil here, since the plot has to establish the full capabilities of the entity and set up what Ethan's going to be doing for the rest of the movie. There's also some corny dialogue and dry humor here and there, but those are all mainstays of the series itself, and I wouldn't say it conflicts with any of the serious scenes. Bottom line, Dead Reckoning Part 1 is a fun blockbuster well worth watching by itself, while also setting up plenty to look forward to in Part 2 next year. The best way to get Hollywood to make more movies with great action, solid characters, and an engaging story like this is to go see it in theaters while you can. Especially to stick it to other tone-deaf studios that have been filming these three components for years. I'm just saying, you can really tell just how bad movies like Indiana Jones 5 or The Flash are when compared to a movie made by people who actually respect their audience. Thanks for watching. If you'd like to see more off-the-cuff reviews like this, let me know in the comments below. I'm the Elusive Eye, going dark.